Okay, let's go.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome. Today, we're going to talk about two things. We're going to stretch that out into the episode. It's going to be, oh my God, I got to sneeze. I muted the microphone on time. Anyways, we're going to talk about two things. Mexico's dark history. Two things on Mexico's dark history, which is going to be Las Poquinchis. I can't pronounce that. I know I'm butchering that. Which is the dark tale of the Gonzales Valenzuela sisters. And we're also going to talk about, I did not pull that up because I am ridiculous. We're also going to talk over Mexico's dirty war, which, one's about a couple serial killers, women serial killers in Mexico that have murdered over 150 people. And the other one is Mexico slowly getting rid of over 1,200 people and just making them disappear. Now, everyone always talks about the CIA, the American government. You create something like a car that runs on water. You find a solution to free power. They're going to make you disappear. Mexico just said, look, you go against us, we're going to take your picture. And that's the excuse they use. They're going to take a picture, and then people will disappear. They can never find the bodies. Want to know why? Because they dumped them in the ocean. But that's beyond the point. Before we get into the story, we're going to do what we always do. Go over. Got to turn up the volume on that. Sorry about that. So now we're going to go over interesting facts of Hispanic culture. So let's see. Perfect. 20 interesting facts over Hispanic culture that you didn't know. I bet you I know most of these because this is what I do. Yeah, Spanish is spoken everywhere. Oh, cool. Let's see. Okay, number 5. This is an easy one. Learning Spanish gives you a head start for learning the other romances of languages. Which, the language of love is always thought to be like Italian, Spain. Oh my God, my camera's out of focus. There it goes. The language of love. But Spanish is a derivative of all of that because it starts off with the base language of love. So if you can learn Spanish, you can understand a little bit of Italian, Spanish, a little bit of Portuguese, other different languages, French, Italian, Portuguese, anything with the Latin root, a very heavy Latin root-based language, you can learn if you know Spanish. It makes it a lot easier. Spanish is spoken by over 25% of the population. And it actually, it's estimated to be over 25% of the population by the year 2060. Cool. I mean, true, we're everywhere. There's always that common saying that no matter where you are in the world, there's going to be a Mexican. Story of tapas. Who cares about tapas? It's just snacks, which is delicious. Kool-Aid. Number 2, Spanish is the world's second most spoken mother tongue, which makes sense because if it's a derivative of Latin and it has a Latin root and you can speak various different languages if you know the Latin roots and understand it very easily, it's going to make sense that it is the second most spoken language in the world. It's right after Mandarin, and that's because they got us beat by numbers. They just have a lot of people. Let's see, another interesting fact. That's actually an interesting one. Spanish may be making a comeback in the Philippines. I believe that because right now, DJ Magic, which is a staple from the 90s, he is making a resurgence in the Philippines. His numbers have boomed. He slowly died out a little bit. In the 2000s, he was coming back. He's coming back a little bit now because he's on TikTok, Instagram, all that stuff. He's a great music artist. I can't say musician. He's a DJ. DJing could be a musician. But he's great. He makes good songs, everything. And he's coming back in the Philippines. That's his number one market right now. Let's see. We need one more. That one's always been one. Now, no. I don't know. There's really nothing else because, here's one that not a lot of people will know. Wine is a hit across the Spanish-speaking world. Talking about wine, many Spanish-speaking parts of South America have some delicious treats in store for wine lovers. Argentina's famed wine region, Mendoza, is home to several internationally recognized wineries, and you can expect to see wines from Argentina and Chile in most supermarkets. That is true. Whenever you go to the store, you will see wine from Spain, Portugal, Argentina, Chile, and, wine is everywhere, especially for Spain or for Spanish-speaking countries. What's another form of wine? Tequila. It's not made from the same way because wine is used mainly from grapes and fruit, But tequila is made from giant plant, the agave, and it's similar process. Except got some nice little bite at the end. Good tequila is smooth with a little bite at the end. Don't bring up what's it called? Jose Cuervo. Jose Cuervo's some American bullshit. It ain't Mexican. I don't care what you call it. Jose Cuervo is not it. I spit my eyes back in my cup. So that's that. So what should we talk about first? Let's see. Mexico's dirty war, serial killers. I think we'll go with the dirty war first. We'll talk about that, and then we'll transition to the serial killers. Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. So this is just the dark history of Mexico. Some of the things that have happened that Mexico has tried to cover up. This is one of them. The other one's serial killers. It happens. I hate to say it, but it does. Serial killers are everywhere. Okay, so basic knowledge of Mexico's dirty war, or the Mexican dirty war. From 1968 to 1982 till the early 80s. So late 60s, early 80s, a little bit over 20, a little bit under 20 years, right? Was a time known as the Dirty War. Mexican authorities forcibly disappeared more than 1,200 people, usually because the state perceived them as a threat. Decades later, prosecutors have closed the investigation into many of these disappearances without any prosecution or accountability. Now, how did all this come to be? How did this all come to light? Well, it came to light because a military pilot talked about it. He was one of the pilots that was involved with the program. So let's see. So let's talk about it a little bit. Now, I have a picture here. I'm going to share it to the screen. I almost turned off this live. Let's see. Window right here. If you're on live stream on the podcast for Riverside, you will see what I'm saying right now. This right here is one of the people from the Mexican Dirty War. He's being led away. That's just what happened. And, you know, he could have been a criminal. He could have been, now look, I clicked on it. The Mexican Army troops escort arrested student demonstrators on October 3rd, 1968, the day after what became known as the Massacre of Tlatelolco. So in other words, he was a protester. He was most likely protesting the Mexican government, and they just let him away. They probably told his friends and family that he was being led away to interrogation or to be held or whatever. But little did they know that most likely he was never to be seen again. You know how quickly they put two and two together. Last time we saw him, he was being led away by the army. Never seen again. So that's just part of the Mexican, what happened during this time frame. So outside the country, the conflict remains less well known than the Cold War repression seen elsewhere in Latin America. But Mexico's conflict was equally brutal, with the army fighting left-wing insurgents in rural areas, while the forces of the ruling Institutional Revolutionary Party sought to subdue dissent in the cities through arrests, torture, and killings. So, political parties waging war, and Mexico said, you know what? Y'all don't need to be talking anymore. So what happened? They made them disappear. Now, this podcast is all about bringing to light true crime, paranormal activity, and things like that that have happened in Latin America, not just Mexico. We go over stuff over Mexico, Portugal, Spain. We had someone on the show from El Salvador. We had people on the show who knew about stories from other countries. We've talked a little bit about Aztec mythology. We've talked about Mayan mythology. We've talked about Peruvian mythology. We've talked about a little bit of everything. So this isn't just, we're just going to talk about the spooky and the unknown. No, we're going to talk about everything, even the nitty gritty of my own country, like my family's country, where we are from. I am Mexican American, American born, Mexican raised. Guess what? I didn't know about this, but we're going to talk about it. Why? Because it's history that has to be told. And I don't care, because it has to be told. I've talked about cartels. I've talked about, a little bit of everything. I've gone over a lot of stuff. The heroes of Mexico, the villains of Mexico, the heroines of Mexico, the cartels. And then, we're going to get into this on every front, not just Mexico. We're going to go over the dark side of all Latin American countries, and we're going to go over the light of it. We've talked about, like I said, the heroes. Now we're going into the villains. We talked about a dark day in Mexico when the CIA caused Mexico the cartels of Mexico to slaughter 300 plus people in one town. If y'all want to hear that episode, it's like last year. We're going to finally do a part 2 to that. I've been pushing that off because it's a little close to home, because guess what? It's where my family's from in Mexico. It happened in our town. There's also a show on Netflix that goes over it. It's a mockumentary. They did it very nice, and they've changed a lot of the story, a lot of the people and names like that for obvious reasons, but it goes over what happened that day. If you want to check it out, it's called Somos, SOMOS, on Netflix, and it goes over what happened in my town. So let's continue. I'm sorry, I go off on these tangents because people have to know these things. I don't care if you can't say certain things because of fear of the cartels. You can't say certain things because of fear of the government. I can, and I will. Now, will I go on social media and be like, the blank and blank did this while I'm in their territory? I'm not going to do that. There have been a lot of TikTokers, Instagram users, Facebook, YouTubers, whatever, that go on social media in other countries and talk smack about the government, about cartels, about drug lords, about gangs. And guess what happens? They end up missing. I'm at home. I ain't going over there. Now, if the Mexican government is listening to this podcast, hey, cosas pasan, yo no sé. Yo nomás estoy leyendo of the country's Supreme Court. Justice has been given an important boost to those who want a proper accountability for the conflict and its violence. Like I said, a lot of this came back up because a military pilot from Mexico talked about it. He brought it back up as a resurgence. Because, history has to be told. If history is not told, it will be forgotten, and we're doomed to repeat history if we forget it. I feel like that's an important lesson everyone has to learn. If you don't protect your history and you don't learn your history, you're going to be doomed to repeat history all over again, and it's just going to go in a vicious cycle. As elsewhere in Latin America, this effort has included victims' families who have tried to find out what happened to their loved ones. In Mexico, they have largely been met with denials. These denials have been made easier by the fact that they were at the time of the crimes systematic attempts to erase any record that the disappeared person ever existed by destroying official records such as birth certificates and school certificates. So if they were in a government-funded school program, university, it was easy to make them disappear. They could just track all their stuff back and make them disappear. But the hardest part was going to rural towns and making them disappear, because those were separate. Like, even me, if I go back and I try to find records of my ancestry in Mexico, I can only go back maybe 2 generations, 3 generations at most. Why? Small town. And in small towns, it's a little bit harder to do all that stuff. So that's just one of those things where we have to keep going. If we don't keep going, that's what happens. No matter what, we have to keep going. Yeah, during the years of conflict, some local prosecutors did launch some investigations into reported disappearances, but all ended without any charges being filed, and with the investigative files and even the names of the victims being kept secret by the federal prosecutor's office, the Procuradora General de la República, the PGR. As part of this effort, a request was filed under Mexico's Progressive Access to Information law, seeking the most basic data, the names of all those listed as disappeared by the government. This effort was initially blocked by the PGR, which refused to release the relevant 135 files, a decision that was then supported by the National Institute of Access to Information and Persona Data, which oversees the application of the Access to Information law. So even to this day, when they applied to try to get the records out, they were like, nah, we don't know what you're talking about. And even though they have an information law, an information act like we here in the U.S. have, they were still being blocked by the government because Mexico does not want this to come to light, because they made over 1,200 people just disappear just because they talked back. And that's just one of those things. If you talk back to a lot of governing parties, depending on what time you do it, it might be the last time you ever talk back to anybody. So let's get back to reading this. And after this, we're going to talk about the 3 famed serial killers, Mexican women. The Open Society and Justice Initiative, along with the Tija OLE, a local legal group focused on human rights litigation. I can't pronounce that. I know the word. It's in my head. LITIGA. It's in Spanish, and my brain cannot comprehend what it is. But I can say the word litigation. Litigio. There he goes. Oh, God. filed a constitutional challenge to this decision, which the Supreme Court and Amparo, on the grounds that the to Information Law, which came into force in 2003, includes human rights override, which says government agencies cannot withhold information related to investigations of human right abuses of crime or crime against humanity. The Amparo also cited the collective aspects of the right to truth, the right to the recognition of legal personality, and the right to a name for the victims, which must be proportionally weighed in a case on forced disappearances. So, what sums that up is that through their own act of information laws, if it has to do with human rights violations or the government making people disappear, which in cases on forced disappearance, so even if you're made to disappear and the government has anything to do or anyone within a legal authority has anything to do with it in Mexico, that information has to be made available. I bet you they didn't think that law would come back and bite them in the butt on that one. The result was a ruling of the Mexican Supreme Court of Justice on February 1st that granted the petitioners the right to gain access to the names on the grounds that the information requested cannot be kept classified when it refers to crimes constituting grave human rights violations, which include forced disappearances. This court ordered the National Institute of Access to Information and Persona Data to issue a new resolution and to order the PGR to disclose the requested information to the claimant and allowed the claimant to make those names public. In other words, they were right. They're like, look, you're going to give us that information whether you want to or not. And they gave it to them because under their own laws and legal system, they're like, we can't keep it away. The decision was immediately welcomed by the Mexican chapter of HIJOS, a group which campaigns for the victims of forced disappearances across Latin America and which held this important step forward in the effort to ensure that what happened during the Dirty War is never forgotten. As much as they tried to make everyone forget what happened during the Dirty War, not 30, dirty, they're trying to make sure no one ever forgets again, because knowing your history is of that much importance. But the ruling had implications that go beyond Mexico. Other countries in Latin America have similarly fought political struggles over the question of accountability for grave crimes. Some also have similar but as yet untested human right overrides. Provisions in relatively new access to information laws, most were passed in response to early government failures to investigate abuse committed in the name of national security in the 70s and 80s. So a lot of these laws came about because the government was denying that they existed in the 70s and 80s. So this happened in the late 60s, early 80s, between that time frame. So it lines up. They're like, y'all messed something up. We need to hold y'all accountable. And that's what they did with the creation of these laws. And it's not just Mexico. The United States have them. Ours came about in the U.S. after the whole Snowden thing, the Rights to Information Act, and 9/11. I almost said 7/11. God, it's 9/11, not 7/11. I feel stupid for that mistake. Slip of the tongue. I'm sorry. So because of things like that have happened that shook the core of most countries, these laws come up. So it takes something major to happen before there's ever change. So Snowden, and then also with the combination of what happened during 9/11 and the information that came out saying that, hey, the U.S. government knew what was going to happen but did nothing about it. With that kind of information coming out, the Information Act came out. And in Mexico, with everyone saying, hey, what happened to all these people that disappeared? And they're like, what people? It came out. They're like, look, we got to change it. We got to hold people accountable. So now, because of these giant things that happened, now we can find out the truth. It may take some time, but you can find out the truth. The ruling from Mexico Supreme Court has now established an important marker, setting out arguments that others can now use when seeking information on grave crimes and human rights abuses from the national government. It also marks another step forward for the right to truth, an area of developing human rights laws where Latin America, because of its troubled history, has been in the vanguard. The right to truth is defined by the UN Human Rights Council as the right of victims of crimes and abuses, their families and society, to know the truth regarding such violations to the fullest extent of practicable, and particularly to identify the perpetrators, the cause, and the facts of such violations, and the circumstances under which they occurred and why they occurred. Because knowing the truth about our past hopefully means that we will not repeat the mistakes. Like I said, we cannot repeat the mistakes. We have to know what happened. And I get very passionate about these things because the truth is what helps everyone move. Without it, we're just going in circles. And if we're going in circles, what's the whole point of learning? What's the whole point of anything that we do here in society? What's the whole point of history studies? What's the whole point of knowing little things, like things that most people find trivial, like knowing about mythological creatures, knowing about cryptids, knowing about lechuzas, knowing about things like that? They may be stories, but behind the stories, like I've explained in a lot of the episodes of the podcast, there's always the truth. Like vampires, the scary vampires. No, a lot of the times back in like the ancient Mayan and Aztec times, they would find people who have been attacked with giant holes in their neck, supposedly drained of blood. But what happens when a jaguar or a big cat in the jungle attacks somebody? Jaguars are known to go for the throat, and they have two giant incisors to puncture the throat and instant kill somebody, or the back of the neck to kill them. And then they go up into a tree carrying their prey. Guess what? The blood is going to drain. So now you got two giant puncture wounds in the neck. The blood gets drained. Eventually, the animal either takes off and doesn't eat it because it's, believe it or not, giant cats actually save their prey. They'll put it up in a tree, especially like jaguars. They'll put it up in a tree for later to come back and eat it. And so let's say that happens overnight. People from the village come and check it out. Guess what? They found the body drained of blood, hanging upside down from a tree. Vampire mythology comes out. So it's not just trivial information that we learn about our past, it's history. Now, again, that history may be misconstrued into mythology, but there's always a sliver of truth behind it. You just have to dig for it, and then you can find it. And I know that's a stretch, like, hey, vampires are really jaguars that are killing people in the jungle. Duh. But back then, they're silent killers. You'll never see one in the jungles to this day. If you go into the jungle that has jaguars in it, the chances of you spotting it are going to be slim to none. If you spot it, it is way too close to you. That's all I can say. And I'm sorry that I get passionate about these things, but history is one thing that you have to know. And you have to decipher for yourself as to what happened to make sense of it. Because you can always hear what happened from somebody that survived it, and that's going to be a first-hand account. Or you can hear it from historians, and historians are only going to tell you what they've been told and what they know. So, like they always say, there's three parts to every truth. There's your story, my story, and the real story. And that's going to be a combination of everything. Now, unless you weren't there, you're not going to know what happened. So I talk a lot, and it's a lot of information I throw at y'all. I know. It's just, I get passionate about these things. Recap. Mexico's Dirty War involved a number of different groups fighting the government. The groups that took part in the war included the Institutional Revolutionary Party, Mexico's PRI, El PRI, ruled government, backed by the United States against left-wing guerrilla crowds, Christian socialists, and rebellious students. How long did it last? From 68 to 82, and over 1,200 people were forcibly disappeared. The way they were disappeared, so they would take them, and if you were, let's say, protesting in a college or protesting in your town about this, and you were in Mexico, and you were protesting the government, they would round you up, like in the picture that I showed on the stream. They would round you up and take you. And they'd never told you, like, oh, we're going to take you and make you disappear. No, they would take you and be like, okay, we're going to go out over here around the corner to this field, and we're just going to document you. We're going to take a picture of you to, you're on the government's list now. And they would make it seem official. We're going to go and take your picture and for documentation purposes, and you'll be free to go. So when they go, like, okay, go stand against that wall. And the second they turn their back to go stand against the wall, they would shoot them in the back of the head, load them up into an airplane, fly over the ocean, drop them into the water. Now, if the shot was successful, they're dead before they get into the plane. If it wasn't successful, they would still throw them in their plane and throw them into the water. So they were throwing anybody, whether you were alive or dead, they were throwing you into the water from an airplane flying over. Why? Because the chances of you swimming back to shore from the middle of the ocean in a military plane, slim to none. After hitting the water from that altitude, you're going to die. And they were doing it because they didn't want people to tell what happened. Now, it's kind of hard to find what happened. Like they had a name for the gun too. I'm gonna Google that real quick. Let's see. Let's see what was, and I'm gonna put this in quotes, the name of the camera used in the Mexico's Dirty War. They had the name for the camera. Let's see. I don't know if they have it. Yeah, I can't find it. Yeah, so, but recently, like I said, recently this came back. Let's see. So looking through this, I just Googled what was the name of the camera used in the Mexican Dirty War. They had a specific name of it, and that's what they called it. I can't remember what it was called. I think it was called like the Hammer of Justice or something. It was something stupid, but that's what they called it because, they didn't want people to be like, oh, grab me the Kalishnikov. I'm gonna shoot this dude. They were gonna be like, grab me the camera, the Peacemaker camera, and then shoot you in the back of the head, throw you in an airplane, drop your ass off in the water, call it a day. And, you get back to shore, they're like, hey, what happened to so-and-so? Y'all took them for interrogation. Oh, we don't know who you're talking about. Never saw this person ever again. And that's just what happened. You never saw them ever again. And they just disappeared. All this came back into resurgence as early as 2003. So I Googled it. The earliest notice of this from the George Washington University Post was December 5th, 2003, 2018, 05, 24 by the AP News. Like, this just came back into the show. So it was hidden for so long. People have been trying to bring this back. And it took that long to bring it back. From 82 until now, they covered it up until 2005. So 82 to 2005, 82. 23 years it was hidden. It happened for a little bit under 20 years, and it was hidden for another 20 years. So let's go back to reading what the APnews.com had to say about it. The Truth Commission reveals new evidence of death flights during 1965 through the 90s. This one says the 90s. Let's see. More evidence has emerged that Mexican authorities disposed of the bodies of dissidents in death flights during the country's 1965 to the 1990 Dirty War. So this one adds a couple years to it. So this one makes it a little bit over 20 years. The Government Truth Commission said in Report Friday that recollections by witnesses and documents leaked over the years describe the chilling last moments of the victims. Like I said, this came back out because people were leaking information. Mainly one of those people that was leaking information was a former military pilot for Mexico. The execution were part of an effort by the Mexican government at the time to eliminate leftist social and guerrilla movements. The victims who have not been identified or counted were pulled one by one to a bench at a military airfield near Acapulco. They believed they were going to have their photographs taken. See, I told you, believed they were going to have their photographs taken. They were told, hey, we're going to document you here and tell you, and put you on the list for the government because you're a protester against the government. We're going to take your picture and document everything about you. So just be warned, you're now on the government's list, right? I guess, fine. I'm not going to fight that. If someone told me like, hey, they're just going to take your picture, and as soon as they take your picture, you're free to go, whatever, right? You go take a picture and they're like, okay, go stand against that wall. And all of a sudden you hear, hell no. There's nothing you can do. You're surrounded by the military. They're going to get you. And they were shot in the back of the head and their bodies dumped by plane out in the Pacific Ocean. So if you're taking a few miles out into the Pacific Ocean by a military plane, which they can go pretty far, what are the chances that you're swimming back to shore if you survive getting shot in the back? You're not going to make it back. According to testimony by Gustav Tarin, who served in the military police unit at the time, the same pistol was used so often in the killings that the soldiers came up with a nickname for it, the Sword of Justice. I told you it had to name something stupid like that. I said the Hammer of Justice. It was the Sword of Justice. And that's the name of the gun they used, which was the camera that they would take your picture with. I see. It took a couple articles before we found the name, but we found the name. Tarin said that as many as 1,500 people may have been killed that way, though he provided no list nor names of the victims. Some of the victims may have been dying, but not yet dead when they were pushed out of the plane. Like I said, whether you were dead or not, they were pushing out of the train. Military aviation mechanic Margarito Monroy said he participated in 15 of the flights and that female victims were sometimes offered release, or the release of their husbands if they had sex with soldiers. Though he never saw any of them released, the Truth Commission located logbooks for about 30 flights by one plane from the base between 1975 and 1979, and a 2-decade-old witness statement from a man who claimed to be an armed forces deserter. Another 25 flights by another plane are mentioned. So a guy who left the military, he was like, I can't do this, and just went AWOL and disappeared, said there was one plane that did 30 and another plane that did 25. The statement, which had long been held in the archives of a now deceased rights activist, included a list of 183 names of likely victims of the death flights. Several of those names match people who disappeared during the government counterinsurgency campaign. So it happened. The death flights were a real thing. They kept as much information hidden from everybody as much as they could possibly keep it hidden from everybody. And they did this, and they held back nothing. And if you talked about it, you would disappear. That is what the Mexican government did. This also happened where else did this happen? In Argentina. During 2012-2017 trial, survivors in Argentina testified that the flights took place at least weekly. So this one happened in Argentina from 76 to 83, military by the dictatorship. So it was less time than the one in Mexico, but more is known about it because it became more public a lot faster because it was part of a dictatorship. And people fight dictatorships tooth and nail, and they throw information out as much as they can, which is how people knew about it. But the one in Mexico was part of just the Mexican government. It wasn't a dictatorship. They weren't fighting it as hard. They were just fighting the things that they thought was wrong with it. So that's the difference. The rest of the article goes over the one in Mexico, one in Argentina. Yeah. Oh, they actually mentioned a Mexico president, I believe, that might have been involved with it. Let's see. In Mexico, the less widespread executions appeared to target small rural guerrilla movements in Guerrero State, which Acapulco is located in. But a broad range of people were apparently swept up in the killings. The Mexican executions appeared a bit more rudimentary and less well planned. Fishermen in the area recalled seeing bodies wash up on shore, after which the military allegedly began placing them in sacks and weighed down with rocks before tossing them into the ocean. So they weren't even thinking about it. They're like, okay, well, we got to get rid of this batch of 30 over here. Just go throw them in the water. And after a while, bodies bloat. The bacteria inside your body produces oxygen and air, carbon dioxide, because the bacteria is eating everything inside, and you bloat and you float. So after that, they got smart and started weighing them down and throwing them in the ocean. The revelations were part of a 4,000-page report detailing everything from executions, tortures, and disappearances and forced displacement carried out by the government against farmers, students, union activists, and members of indigenous groups. So does any of those groups sound like they were dangerous? Farmers, students, indigenous people. None of those sound like a union activist. I forgot union activists. None of those sounds like they were like militants, cartel members, things like that. They were just people wanting justice from the government. Almost none of the abuse have ever been brought to trial, despite investigations having started as far back as Presidente Vicente Fox's administration in 2000 through 2006. So I saw the name of a president, but that's when they started the investigation. So it took all the way until the thousands to start all this stuff. Victims of death flights were just one small part of a bigger strategy of repression. Overall, the Truth Commission cited evidence that nationwide there were about 4,500 identified victims of severe abuses during the so-called Dirty War. It documented 1,450 were killed and another 517 simply disappeared without a trace. Yeah, it got so bad to the point that the government has carried out excavations in and around military bases to try to relocate the remains of those buried in clandestine graves with relatively little success. Yeah, during the commission's work, the remains of 7 victims were recovered. So they got rid of the bodies really well. Okay, in 2004, this is what I saw. In 2004, now deceased former President Luis Echeverria became the first former Mexican head of state formally accused of criminal wrongdoing. Prosecutors linked Echeverria, who governed from 1970 to 1976, to the dirty war in which hundreds of left-wing activists and members of French guerrilla groups were imprisoned, killed, or simply disappeared without a trace. So there was a president involved. So it went all the way to the top. That's a lot. And I hate to say this, we're going to move on to something lighthearted. No, we're not. We're moving on to serial killers next. The Mexican government, an organized body, killed 1,400 people, right? They allegedly made people disappear. 4,000 people tortured, disappeared, and whatever, right? The Mexican government. Now we're going to talk about three sisters. I think it's three sisters, 3 or 4 sisters who killed almost that many themselves. It is known as Las Boquinchis story. And I know I misspelled that or mispronounced that because I'm Mexican American. I'm not American. I'm Mexican American. I'm not Mexican. You know what I mean? So some words I cannot pronounce in Spanish to English. Disturbing, although not morbid, a portrait of the real prostitution case that shocked the countryside in the 60s, told in flashbacks after the Boquinchas sisters' arrest. The film deconstructs the story of these 3 women who abducted young girls to work as prostitutes and make money for them. There's a movie about them. Let's pull up the information I have. How many sisters is it? 1, 2, 3, 4? 4 sisters. I was right. 3 to 4 sisters. And I got pictures too, which if you're on the live stream for Riverside, you will see that right now. Or if you wait till the podcast comes out next week, Monday, midnight, so you can have all week to watch it. This is what they look like. I want this one. Bam. This is what they look like. Oh, these 4 beautiful women here. They look like someone's grandmother, don't they? But little do you know that they are homicidal maniacs. Let's get on with the story here. They are originally from Jalisco, Mexico. The sisters Carmen, Delfina, Maria de Jesus, y Luisa Gonzales Valenzuela were the product of a dysfunctional family. Their mother, Bernardina, was a selfless Catholic devotee who religiously followed the rules of the church. She instilled in them a mentality of fear and a cult-like worship to the religion. On the other hand, their father, Isidro, was an alcoholic sexist who used his power as sheriff to abuse them. So, on one hand, they're devout Catholics, almost so devout that it's a cult religion. On the other hand, their dad was an alcoholic, abusive man who would just do whatever he wanted because he was the sheriff. And who's going to stop the sheriff? That's a lot. So, and most likely in their twisted mind, anything that happened to them because of their dad, they deserved it because of their faith. They did something wrong with their faith. And also they had to do whatever their dad told them to do because honor thy father and mother. These two things don't go together. You can't be brainwashed into thinking that the book is law and then the law tells you what to do and you're doing wrong things because this tells you that they're right, but they're wrong, but this tells you they're right. It's confusing, isn't it? It's horrible. That's a horrible way to grow up. Thinking that no matter what you do, you're wrong because something else tells you they're right. What happened to my mouse? My mouse stopped working. I'll fix that real quick. I don't know why my mouse does this. It randomly disconnects from the computer. Okay, so I'm going to read a little bit of this and then we're going to go back to it. So it all started when Isidro, their father, caught Carmen, the oldest sister, having an affair with a much older man. Enraged by her behavior, he sent her away and locked her in a cell in the town's jail. Remember, he is the sheriff. This same day, Isidro was sent to look for a rebellious law-breaking man who he ended up killing. For this, Isidro ran away, hiding in small towns near his city. He had forgotten about his daughter and left her locked up for 14 months. She was freed by an old man, and in return for the favor, she ended up marrying him. So the story already starts off crazy. She was caught having an affair, like messing around with an older guy, right? Her dad didn't like this. So being the over control of sheriff father that he is, he threw her in jail. And then they're like, I got to go bring this other guy in. You sit here and think about what you did. And he goes looking for another guy, kills him, and is like, well, that wasn't supposed to happen. And then he runs away. and leaves his daughter locked up in a jail for 14 months until somebody else releases her. And she was like, I'm so thankful for you releasing me from jail that my dad put me in 14 months ago. Year. A year and 2 months she was locked up because of basically timeout. You're grounded in a jail cell for a year and 2 months. And she was released by a random person. And she was like, thank you. Want to get married for my gratitude? That starts off crazy, doesn't it? That's just, oh my God. Let's go back to their life story, their beginning. Oh, TikTok is saying I'm not a human being. Got it. Verification complete. So the Gonzales Valenzuela sisters were born in the north central Mexican state of Jalisco in the town of El Salto de Juanacatlan. Their father, Isidro Torres, was a local policeman known for his strict and authoritarian nature. He imposed several restrictions on his daughters, forbidding them from wearing makeup or socializing with boys. So I guess having an affair with one is definitely out of the question. Violation of these rules were met with harsh punishment, including being locked up in a cell at the police station. A year and 2 months. Godly. They look like they had a hard life. If I show y'all a picture of them again, let me show y'all a picture again. I don't know which two of these are. Which two are these? It doesn't tell me. Probably says somewhere else. Let's see. Window. Bam. Share. This is two of them. They look like they've lived a hard life. Maria de Jesus and Delfina Gonzales of Valenzuela. So, like I said, after he killed him, he took off. So the family's life took a dramatic turn when Isidro Torres shot and killed a man during an argument. So the man he was going for, who he argued with and killed accidentally, was actually someone he was supposed to bring in. And he killed him, panicked, and ran away, staying nearby, but didn't go back home for obvious reasons. The incident forced the family to relocate to the village of San Francisco del Rincon in the state of Guanajuato, seeking refuge from the ensuing turmoil. So I wonder, did they leave the daughter there for 14 months and they just left? Which is how she got married to a random person? In an attempt to escape poverty and their father's oppressive control, the sisters opened a bar. However, the venture failed to generate the desired income, leading them to turn to prostitution. The illicit activity proved lucrative, allowing them to expand their operation through Jalisco, Guanajuato, and, oh my God, I cannot pronounce this, Querétaro. Damn. There's another picture. A mob awaits eagerly to lynch Las Boquinchis as they were escorted by police. And there's legit a mob behind them. They got 3 or 4 police officers, maybe one military guy, and 2 of them right there. The empire, their criminal empire, took a dark and sinister turn when the sisters began recruiting young women through deceptive advertisements for housemaids. To have enough girls for the brothels, they kidnapped or tricked girls from all over Jalisco, Guanajuato, even other states like Michoacan, Zacatecas. Aside from just taking them off the streets, they told girls they would be working as maids and even had the consent from their parents. Once the kidnapped girls arrived in the brothels, they were raped, showered in freezing water, drugged, and then put to work that same night. The sisters' cruelty knew no bounds. Once girls reached the age of 25, they were considered too old and were sent to a verdugo. Never heard that word before. Verdugo, a man that tortured, who beat them, and then starved them to death. So they send them to a psychopath. So once you hit the age of 25, they're like, you're a little too used up. Go with this guy. He'll take care of you. And he took care of them. That was it. Additionally, they murdered wealthy clients who arrived with large sums of money. Many of her customers were police officers, military officers, soldiers, and politicians. In 1948, due to stricter laws, they were forced to close their brothel and moved to San Juan de los Lagos, Jalisco, and named it El Guadalajara de las Noches. So they were set up. They had military, police officials, political officials. They had people with deep pockets and strong connections in their pockets. They had it all. But once the law became a little bit more strict and they couldn't get around it, they moved. They went somewhere else. Now let's hear about the discoveries that were made. I got to take a sip of Kool-Aid. And this is Kool-Aid. It's red Kool-Aid. If you call Kool-Aid by its name, there's something wrong with you. It's red Kool-Aid. The best Kool-Aid, okay? I don't care what you say. Red Kool-Aid's the best Kool-Aid. So the sisters imposed numerous strict rules. No kissing, no sexual acts between the girls, and no anal sex. Clients who requested any of these were banned from the brothel, and some sources claim they were even killed. So they had rules. So no kissing, no lesbian, can't be lesbian, no bisexual activities, can't kiss, two girls can't kiss, and no butt stuff. I don't know, that kind of sounds like standard rules. I don't know. I've never been to a brothel. Never been brothel. No, I've never been. But yeah, so they had rules, right? To enforce these rules, the sisters kept the girls under constant surveillance. If any infractions occurred, the girls faced severe punishment, including being forced to kneel while holding bricks, being beaten with a nail-studded bat, and being starved. Okay, so being starved is horrible. Kneeling and holding bricks is horrible. Those are severe punishments. But being beaten with a nail-studded bat, that's not a punishment. You're being murdered. You're not surviving being cracked in the head with a fucking nail, with a bat with nails in it. Now, if they're like getting hit in the ribs, no, if you're getting hit in the ribs, you're breaking ribs, the nails are puncturing you, you're bleeding out. There's nowhere you can get hit that's going to survive, unless it's like the arms and legs. And that's even if you don't nick an artery. There's just too much. Like, that's not a punishment. You're killing somebody. Delfina's son, El Tepocate, who assisted in torturing and controlling the girls, was killed in a bar fight. When Delfina attempted to shoot her son's murderer but missed, it provoked the local officials who sought to arrest Delfina. Delfina fled to Guadalajara, and in her absence, police raided Maria de Jesus' brothel. The girls and Maria were detained for a day but managed to escape at night, taking refuge in a house they owned in San Francisco del Rincón. The girls were first forced to stay there for 8 months under harsh conditions, leading to many deaths from starvation and sickness. So they were arrested. One of the sisters ran because she was in trouble because she tried to kill somebody and missed. And then while she was gone, they were raided. All of them were arrested and put in jail. And then they somehow managed to escape. So the managed to escape part is fishy because, as we know, previously, before this point, they had top military, political, and police officials in their pocket with blackmail because they were like, hey, you've been to our brothel. We know what you do at night. Does your wife know? Do the people of this town know? You know what I mean? So them mysteriously escaping is not a mystery. We know they escaped. They blackmailed the guard. They're like, hey, Julio, your girl's over here. Does your wife know? I dropped the keys. I better go somewhere else and find them. And boom, they're gone. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a mystery as to how they escaped. They were let out. Quote unquote, let out. Anyways, next part. And then they ran away to one of the houses they owned. Like, is this not... I mean, nowadays, if I own, like, this mug, the government knows I bought it. Or somebody bought it for me, you know? Did they not have, like, deeds, records of the properties that they owned? Could they not have been like, okay, well, the closest house that they own is, like, down the street. We can go get them. Or were they just that well connected that they were like, they disappeared. We don't know what to tell you, people. I don't know how they disappeared. But they hid for 8 months, most likely whatever provisions they had, limited provisions, in which led to a lot of them dying. The girls, not them, the prostitutes. January 6, 1964, feeling the pressure from police, the sisters moved the girls to Rancho San Angel, a site previously used for torture and burying the bodies. 12 days later, Carolina Ortega, one of the girls, escaped and reported to the police. Although the officers who took the report was a client of the brothel. See, I told you. So they left because they felt the pressure of them closing in on them. So they went to where they tortured and killed the girls. And one of them escaped, and the first cop she talked to was in their pocket. They knew. I told you. See, it wasn't a mystery as to how they got out. They got out because they were let out. I get excited when the lines I draw turn out to be true. He took it seriously. The sisters denied all allegations, but an inspection revealed 90 bodies. Subsequently, they were arrested and transferred to a prison in Guanajuato to avoid the threat of lynching. The Gonzales Valenzuela sisters' reign of terror lasted from 1950 to 1964. Their downfall was compounded when police arrested Josefina Gutierrez, a procuress suspected of kidnapping young girls in the Guanajuato area. Under interrogation, Gutierrez implicated the Gonzales sisters, leading authorities to search their property near San Francisco de Rincon. Oh, excuse me, I had a burp. The discovery was beyond horrifying. Police unearthed the bodies of 80 women, 11 men, and several fetuses. The extent of their crimes shocked the nation and earned them the dubious distinction of the most prolific murder partnership by the Guinness Book of World Records. Estimates suggest that the sisters may have killed over 150 and possibly even more than 200 individuals. That's a lot of people by themselves. 4 women killed over 200 people. And it could be more. They made people disappear. Like, if supposedly, if they didn't like what you said and they were against what you wanted, their rules, they could have killed you. So it could be more. That's just what they can believably confirm. In 1964, the Gonzales Valenzuela sisters were tried and each sentenced to 40 years in prison. So each one 40 years. Their lives in prison were marked by tragic and bizarre events. Delfina died in a freak accident when a construction worker accidentally dumped cement on her head while trying to catch a glimpse of the notorious killer. So while he was trying to look at her, he dropped cement on her and killed her. Maria served her sentence and subsequently disappeared from public view upon her release. Carmen succumbed to cancer while still incarcerated, and Maria Luisa was driven to madness by the fear of retribution from angry citizens or protesters. So, one was killed by cement, one was killed by cancer, one disappeared, and the other one went insane. Most likely ended up in an insane asylum. Yeah, she looks very unhappy. The tale of Los Boquinches remains a grim chapter in the history of crime, a stark reminder of the depths of human depravity. And the story continues to fascinate Mexico's horrifying... I can't talk. The story just continues to catch everyone's attention because it is a fascinating story. It's insane, but that is what happens. And that is it for today. At least on here. I'm still going to be on live on TikTok if y'all want to check it out. But thank you very much. And join me next time for another spooky story. And I don't know what I'm going to do next. Might be another true crime event. We're getting close to spooky season, so my time of year. So I'm going to find even more crazy and disturbing stories. This one is one of the top ones that I could find. And the other one was just a dark period in history for Mexico. And speaking of which, I think actually I know what I'm going to do next week. I'm going to finally do a part 2 to A Dark Day in Allende and close that chapter and finally finish it. It's been over a year since I started that story, and I'm finally going to finish it. So thank you very much. Join me next time. And like always, everybody, stay spooky. And you on TikTok, I'm going to keep y'all live over here. Y'all can watch me edit my video, and y'all can talk to me on the side. And later, guys.